Hello, this is Writers at Work, a podcast for readers and writers about the joys, heartaches, challenges, and satisfaction of the creative writing process. I'm your host, Jim Fusilli. With me today on Writers at Work is Chris Lang, writer, creator, and executive producer of Unforgotten, the beloved British crime drama broadcast in the States on PBS Masterpiece. It's now in its 6th season. Chris began his career in TV as an actor, but fairly early on he wrote episodes of The Bill, the long-running UK police procedural. In short order, he wrote episodes of a number of TV series, including The Tunnel, the British-French adaptation of the Danish-Swedish crime series The Bridge. Then he began a run of shows he created, leading to Unforgotten, that launched in the UK in 2015. The series, which blends the re-examination of cold cases and an intimate gaze into the complicated lives of the investigating police officers, proved immediately popular. It has survived the departure of its star, Nicola Walker. Chris, who co-founded the production company TXTV, has had many other successes at home with popular series, some of which are available here to stream. His latest, WRIGHT, is a family drama drawing comparisons to Succession. You can find it on BritBox. I hope he and you will forgive me when I suggest you visit Chris Lang's wiki page. He's won and been nominated for too many awards to list here. The New Statesman says, Lang is such a good writer, plot, dialogue, juicy subtext, he can do them all, and quite often I'll add. Chris Lang, welcome to Writers at Work.
Thank you.
As a young actor, did you analyze scripts with an eye toward becoming a screenwriter one day?
No, I don't think I did. I think it was a much more circuitous route to becoming a screenwriter, an iterative process that started out with by chance, really. Just I was working in a regional theatre, met another actor who we were asked to prepare a kind of a showpiece for the end of the season. We were up there for 6 months in a town called Nottingham, and we were asked to sort of galvanise all the other actors to do a party piece for the end of the season, just between the cast and crew, not for public consumption. And we got everyone to read a poem or do a piece from Shakespeare or sing a song, and then we said, what are we going to do? And we decided to write some sketches. We were in Nottingham, so we wrote a sketch about Robin Hood, who comes from Nottingham, and that was the first time I'd ever written anything, and actually we performed it in front of the cast and crew, and it got this very good response. And so there was this sort of very visceral connection to the words that we'd written and to a response that you often, well, for many, many decades you didn't get in television. You do now because you can hear what the audience are thinking through Twitter. But at the time it was just really powerful. And I remember thinking, wow, this is a really powerful way to express yourself and to write something that gets a strong reaction. So that's how it started. That was the first thing I wrote and got a reaction to, and I did that for 5, 6, 7 years before I actually started to write long form pieces.
Could you feel yourself improving? I mean, let's say you started from zero. Let's just you were not a writer and then you wrote something. Let's assume that's zero. How quickly did you begin to feel that, you know what, I can do this. I'm pretty good at this?
That's a really good and interesting question, because I think I'm going to sound quite unusual here. I felt it right from the word go. I thought I never really felt it about being an actor. I never thought I was at the Royal Academy, so I was literally surrounded by nascent film stars. Sir Ken Branagh now was in the year above me. Ralph Fiennes was in the year below me. Sean Bean was in my term. Janet McTeer was in my term. You were just surrounded by this extraordinary talent, and I never felt, I just felt out of my depth and that I didn't have what they did. But when I wrote these first sketches, and then the guy I was writing with, we wrote a screenplay together whilst also up at the theatre. And I remember thinking, yeah, this feels right. It wasn't a brilliant screenplay, but it was a screenplay. It had all of the ingredients of a screenplay, and it wasn't that far off what I was watching on the television at that time. So I felt annoyingly confident. And it's remained that way ever since. Ask any script editor or producer who's ever worked with me. I've never been troubled by that doubt that so many writers have. People often say they hand in their work, and it's like the worst moment when they hand in a script because they're terrified of what people are going to think. I always think, you lucky people, getting to read this work of staggering genius. So, that's my issue, but it's a good one to have.
So as your career progresses, you're hired as a writer for series that have established characters. Given that you were going to be a showrunner someday, that original series were going to arise from your vision, what level of influence did you try to have on the screen work of those established series? Did you have an urge to move them in different directions?
Yeah, I mean, a massive, massive, powerful urge, which was never fulfilled, of course. You have to earn your spurs. And whenever I talk to students, I never want to sound depressing, but I always try to sort of subtly help them understand that this is a long old journey. Hopefully you'll get there, but don't expect to get there for quite a while, sometimes decades. And I would say, whilst I was learning my trade, I found that the hardest period of my career. You're right. When other people's shows, you're learning how to do it. You're learning the skills, but you have very little control. And even in my first shows that I wrote and created myself, even on those early shows, and I'm talking maybe 25 years ago, I've created my first original show. I wasn't allowed in the casting. I certainly was not allowed in the edit. In those days, it was an old VHS would sometimes get sent to my house, and I might fire back a few notes, most of which were ignored. But it takes a long time to get to that point where you have what you want. It's interesting because I am a snout to tail writer and producer. I want to be involved in literally everything, down to looking at choosing locations, designers, props, obviously casting, obviously edit, score, all of those obvious things. But lots of writers just don't have that desire. Someone told me the other day, I don't know if it's true or not, so don't quote me, but Jack Thorne, one of our greatest writers in the UK, is not massively interested in the pre-production and post-production process. He hands in the script and kind of then moves on to the next script, and I just can't do that. When I start creating an idea, I have a full vision of it in my head, and for many years I wasn't able to fulfill that because other people took over, and the culture's changed as well. I think writers have more primacy now than they might have done 20-30 years ago, so they are allowed to do that, and the whole notion of a showrunner has come much more to the forefront of the business. So it's more gettable, but yeah, it was very, very frustrating. I would say when I wrote my first drama script in 92, 93, it was a TV show called The Bill, and I handed in the script, and that was the next thing I got was the finished tape, and that was it. And I found it very difficult.
It sounds like you were born to be a showrunner.
Well, I think that also goes back to choosing not to be an actor. It's in its most negative connotation, it's about being a control freak. But actually, and there is an element of that, and I didn't have any control as an actor, obviously. But it's about enjoying the whole process and liking the idea of being able to fully envisage a world. It is, I guess the nearest thing is like to those people who have those extraordinary train sets that get bigger and bigger and bigger, and they create a whole world around it, and they go and immerse themselves in that. And it's not just some trains going around on a track. It's a town, it's a village with a hospital, it's it's all of those things. And there's something very satisfying about immersing yourself in a world that it's world building. You've created everything, or you've had a hand in creating everything. None of which, by the way, is to diminish the collaborative nature of it, because when it works best, although you'll have a vision and hopefully you'll be guiding and trying to bring people with you, you're also looking all the time for other people to take the baton for a period of time, or in their skill, and to give you ideas and tell you what they're thinking. And when you choose well, when you get your good HODs in place, everyone is contributing and everyone is adding and raising, my script up to a high level. Hopefully that's when it works well.
Now, beginning in 2001, you seem to have had a crime drama broadcast per year. And what I found fascinating is you seem to attract high quality actors, multidimensional actors. I mean, Unconditional Love had Robson Green, and Amnesia had John Hannah. And then Mother's Son had Nicola Walker. How do you like working with actors?
That is one of the great pleasures of the business, is that you often get to work with people that you've admired for decades. And Tom Courtenay, who I had coffee with in the Ivy to persuade him to come and work on Unforgotten, he was an actor that I'd been watching since I was a kid in the 1960s and the 1970s. And, in classic films like Dr. Zhivago or Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner or Billy Liar. And he was, a bit of a legend to me. And there I was sitting opposite him, and he wanted to do my show and to perform a part that I'd kind of written for him. So, that's an incredible buzz. Tom was a sort of legendary figure, and then there are just figures who are contemporaries of mine that I've watched and admired, or may even have, gone to the Royal Academy with, who it's just lovely to get to work alongside those people who I've just always admired their talent. And for me, as someone who, as I said earlier, went to RADA and never felt really that I was earning my place there, to be able to work with people who I could see that extraordinary talent in. It's an extraordinary skill being a great actor, and I admire it even more because I know I couldn't ever have done it. It's a huge privilege, and I absolutely love it.
I'd like to ask you about The Tunnel, which was broadcast on PBS here. I remember loving The Bridge, which was the Danish-Swedish predecessor. And then I loved The Tunnel. But I remember when I heard The Tunnel was coming, my kind of reaction was, oh, no, don't do this. And yet it was terrific. I mean, Chris, it was really great. But what were the challenges of adapting, what to keep, what to toss? You had to appeal to both the British and French sensibilities. I mean, what were the challenges to make that adaptation?
The challenges are always when you take someone else's show. And by the way, I should give credits to the lead writer, Ben Richards. I did 2 or 3 episodes, I think, but Ben did 3, 4. And it was him that was really doing the lion's share of the work. But it was, the set. You wanted it to be the same but different. You wanted it to tap into exactly what The Bridge had done. And I, like you, had watched The Bridge way before I knew I was going to work on a British remake, and absolutely loved it. So you wanted to capture what people loved about that, but you also wanted to make it unique and specific to our culture. So that was that was the real challenge, not losing what was essentially brilliant about the original concept, but trying to infuse it with something uniquely English/French. And I think we did it. I didn't work on the subsequent series. I just worked on the first series, but it was again a very happy experience.
I'm glad. I'm glad because I think it was richly rewarding for the audience, particularly for those of us who might have had a trepidation about taking the story and moving it elsewhere. Anyway, what led to you establishing TXTV or production company?
Again, a desire to gain more control. If you were the boss of the company, no one could really tell you what to do. Actually, that's not true because you're always under a broadcaster. So there's always a boss above you who's going to be giving you creative notes. But it was to do that and to sort of own the shows that I was making, and also to get other writers in and hopefully bring some of the experience that the three of us had gained over a combined many decades of being in the business, and hopefully bring along some new younger talent. And we did that for 10, 15 years. We've just wrapped it up just because we're all moving into different phases, but it was a really nice period. And I never was exclusive to my own company. I was always going off and writing things with other people, and that was part of the deal. So it was the best of both worlds for me.
Do you consider yourself ambitious?
Hugely. And I'm 64 in a month or so, and I feel as hungry and as desirous of creating new things as I've ever been, which is quite odd because most of my friends are really gearing down to retirement now. And I just feel I feel more fecund than I've ever felt. I just feel ideas are sort of spilling out, and the only thing that will stop me engaging with them is time, and how many shows I can make at one time, which will turn out to be 3 next year.
Have you ever run into people who use the word ambitious as an insult?
Yeah, I mean, I think in England particularly, it's. I think in other cultures, I certainly think in America, it's an uncomplicated tick. In the UK, it's seen as slightly vulgar, but I've never felt that. I want to achieve a lot. I want my work to be seen by as many people as possible. If I didn't think that it was worth watching and that I had something to say, I wouldn't be making it. I wouldn't be doing it in the first place. Anyone who writes, anyone who's involved in the creative world, there's an implicit sense that you want to understand why we are the way we are, why we do the things we do, and that you might be able to shed a tiny bit of light on the nature of being human. And if you believe that, then you want lots of people to see what your ideas and thoughts are, and that's all it ever is, really. You're exploring human nature, and you want people to share that and to provoke thought. And certainly on a show like Unforgotten, I've just had so much feedback over the years from people all around the world that the show has touched and shifted and changed and provoked difficult conversations and in some ways, and this sounds slightly pretentious, but there are certain of those series that made people change their lives a little bit, because it spoke to them in some unique way, and they made changes in their lives. And that is just, you get a letter or an email from someone who's tracked you down through your agent or whatever, and the things people often write are incredibly moving. And again, it's an overused word, but it does feel like it's a privilege to be able to communicate with other people in that way.
Yeah, it's a funny sensation to create and give, and then receive something positive in return. The giving is satisfying enough, right? And then you start hearing from people, and it is so enriching.
It's in the last 15 years. You've also, most of us have also had this have this dialogue through social media. It was always a slightly lonely experience when you put your work out there, and then the only person who really fed back was your mum, who'd ring you as the credits rolled, and if you had a good mum, she'd tell you it was wonderful, darling. But that was about it, really. And the reviews and everything, and people in the industry would generally comment on it, but not many other people. But as soon as Twitter or X started, you just had this constant feedback. Most of it, I'm pleased to say, has always been lovely. But it's just I've really valued that. It's so nice to be able to connect with an audience in a way that you never could before.
Did it change the way that you thought of your audience? Let me give you an example. When I was writing for the Wall Street Journal, I was only writing for the readers of the Wall Street Journal.
Uh-huh.
And I thought I understood them pretty well. And then suddenly, here comes X, and millions of people who never read the Wall Street Journal are now reading me.
Yeah.
Because of the subject matter I wrote about popular music. And I began to think, boy, do I have to change the way I write to retain these people?
Yeah.
I mean, did you ever think like that? Boy, I have a whole different audience now. Do I need to change?
That's really interesting you asked that, because I never have done. I've always thought, you just write what feels right for you. But when Series 6 of Unforgotten went out in the UK, and it's just playing out in the States now, it had a very different reaction from the audience, one that I've never had before, because it was about the division in both our country and indeed to a degree in yours. Well, yours probably arguably more extreme. And I've never had that polarity and this sort of tsunami of anger, which of course reflected exactly what the series was about. And I kind of expected it was coming at me, because I knew it was it was a febrile. We're living in a febrile times, and it was a very contentious subject. But I was still surprised by the strength of it. And there was a period where I thought, geez, do I want to do that again? Because it's quite disconcerting to have weeks of that anger coming at you. I mean, it tended to come more at the show than me, but a fair amount still came at me. And I've thought about it a lot since. And then I think, no, I think if you want to write something that feels truthful to you and that you think is interesting, you have to weather that and accept that that's part of the contract. And that's fine. I mean, you don't always just want to write safe stuff. You want to write stuff that's provocative. And if it's provocative, it's going to get a strong reaction. And I think you have to just weather it. So, yeah, that's how I feel. I have to say, I'm just about to start shooting Series 7. And it's not about anywhere near as contentious a subject. It's still a very powerful, emotive subject. But I am quite relieved that I know that the audience won't react in that way.
Well, I love this season, and a strange event. My wife and I were watching it as it unfolded. So we just watched episode 2 the other day, and at the end of it, we found that we completely disagreed.
Wow, that's fantastic!
Yeah, oh, it was great. It was great, and I
hope you disagreed agreeably.
No, we did. But I said to her, "Oh, you've got that all wrong," and she said, "No, you don't understand her at all." And I thought, oh God, what a great thing for a writer, to achieve this, where both points of view are presented so thoroughly that the viewer could completely buy in and feel at ease and ignore the other side.
Well, I think that's what I was trying to do the whole way through. What you see, your reaction and your wife's reaction is exactly what I was hoping for, which people have an agreeable discussion about, and they see it through the prism of their own belief system, and that's what we're all doing all the time. But and then they have a respectful debate about it. But what actually happened more than that was that people only saw their viewpoint and refused, sometimes quite willfully, to see the other side of the debate. And given that that's what the whole series is about, let's try and see how other people think and try and understand how other people think. That was that was it was revealing. It was revealing of how entrenched the polarized positions in both of our countries have become, and we're all guilty of that. I'm not trying to set myself as some sort of paragon of virtue in that. We all do it all the time, but it was really marked how polarized people were in their reactions, blindly so sometimes. They were actually, there was a whole story obviously about a university lecturer, which actually, if you analyzed it, was much more on the side of the sort of anti-woke brigade, but people still, they didn't read it like that, but it really was that, and their prejudices wouldn't allow them to see beyond some of the sort of more headline facets of the story.
Well, Chris, you had something in this season that I will remember forever because it's so perfectly distilled the moment in which we live. I hope I'm not giving too much away, but you have a right-wing talking head, very provocative woman, and off air she expresses an opinion to her producer, and her producer says, our audience don't care about your opinion. They don't care about mine or anyone else's here. They just want to hear their own. God, that's brilliant. That's brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, originally that part of the story was meant to be set in the States. Yeah, we were going to shoot it in Alabama, and originally it was going to be a kind of InfoWars / Fox News type of outfit, or sort of slightly lower rent than Fox News. But in the end, as we were gearing up to production, I think we just all felt, and PBS felt, and we felt, that the times were too febrile to shoot it there, and so we relocated it to Ireland, which has, in many ways, it has some of the similar religiosity that America has, that underpins some of that story, and I think it worked, just as well there. But I think, a lot, and we have some of the burgeoning channels like InfoWars and is it Newsmax? I think in the States we have some of those. Yeah. We have some of those sorts of things in the UK beginning. We have a channel called GB News, and it's true. No one is on there to do anything other than mirror back what I would argue are less civilized opinions back to their audience. That's all they want to hear. And they want to hear people on telly saying it back to them, so it makes them feel better about it. We're right in the middle of the most difficult time at the moment. Lots of demonstrations and / near rioting outside refugee hostels. It's really unpleasant. People's baser instincts are being allowed to come to the fore because they're being enabled on shows like that, and they're being told, they're being, monologued at by people who are reflecting their baser instincts.
Sure. Here though, we have the president doing that.
Yes, exactly that. Yeah. And we have very prominent politicians doing it here as well. And they're all, to a degree, being enabled by Trump and aping some of the things he's doing and decrying the foundations of a civilized society, the judiciary and the press and all of these things. And we're having exactly the same issue here. And be careful what you wish for, I would say to those people.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you said earlier about how Unforgotten changed lives or affected lives. I have to say, I found myself deeply engaged with the story of Cassie Stewart and her widowed father. Mm-hmm. I'm going to summarize, but if it's not accurate, just cut me off. He's cold, irritable, increasingly forgetful, and she's not. She's warm and attempting to be understanding, and because of that, there's no sanctuary for Cassie, who is DCI and working on some very difficult cases. The tension between the two felt very real to me. And as you were writing and filming, did it seem to take on a life of its own and become larger than what you might have originally intended?
Yeah, that's exactly what happens. I've talked about this before because it's a strange process that sometimes the character takes you themselves down a path that you didn't envisage, and it's almost like you're running after them to catch up, and to that they are dictating what the story is. It's a very strange alchemy, and I don't really fully understand it. But you can storyline as much as you want, but sometimes a character will say something. You'll type, your fingers will dart across the keyboard, and suddenly a character has said something that surprises you, and wasn't what you had in mind, and takes you down a different route. And that is the part of the process that I find most exciting, because you just didn't, you didn't plan it. You didn't see it going that way. And again, when you write a script, it's this incredibly Darwinian process. As going back to like what I was saying about the actual career, it's iterative. It evolves in strange and odd ways. And scripts are very Darwinian. They turn into things that you didn't think they would necessarily. And when you're fortunate enough to get a canvas as large as this one has been, which is 11 years with largely the same characters, the journeys you can go on are extraordinary, and the places you can take those characters, or they can take me, are extraordinary.
Well, you took us in a place I would have never expected. Um, you created darkness out of light, or that you put some light into the darkness, because you gave that father a lover, a
Yeah,
romantic interest.
yeah,
And this causes Cassie to have a new antagonist. So
yeah,
it doesn't resolve anything for her. It actually makes matters worse in some ways. I thought that was
yeah.
just a great decision, a great
It
detour.
was just, what I remember Sally Wainwright, one of our great writers here as well, who who was distilling what it is you've got to do to a character in order to make them feel real and to be engaging with an audience. And you've just got to pile more and more crap on them, and just when you think you've heaped enough on them, then heap some more, because we're all pushing through life, and we're all experiencing vicissitude on a very regular basis. Whatever difficulties. If you ever think that your family is unusually difficult, you just have to look left or right to the rest of your extended family, or to your friends, and you'll see people going through extraordinary things, really tough things. So it never feels unreal to me that people would have to deal with that. When I was writing that, just after I wrote that series 4, my mum got diagnosed with dementia, which was odd because I'd sort of been writing from a research point of view rather than from a personal point of view. But then what happened with my mum was so evocative of what happened in the series, and you think, yeah, the research was good, and I wrote it fairly accurately, because it's an incredibly difficult disease to navigate your way through. And there were plenty of times with my mum that I was just stopping myself and going, wow, you're reacting really badly, and you're reacting a bit like Cassie did on occasion. So, you got to pull back, and you got to educate yourself, and you got to learn and get better as a human being. But it was an odd experience.
Yeah.
And also I should feed into it that I've had a brilliant police advisor on the show for 7 seasons, and the one thing that he always communicated to me was how tough it is being a copper, how much it takes out of you. And I don't think we see that enough in police shows. Probably the most common genre there is, but watching what it takes out of an ordinary person doing an extraordinary job is something that really needs to be marked and shown. And it can be catastrophic. I read a lot of books, and I spoke to a lot of coppers who had breakdowns and had to leave the position. So it's not an uncommon experience what she went through.
Yeah. I want to, again, another decision that you took. I want to go back to season 2, and to any of our listeners who haven't watched season 2 yet, put your fingers in your ears now. Um, you have three characters who were sexually abused, and they knew each other prior to the murder of their assailants. Cassie and Sonny discover that those three characters made a pact to kill each other's abusers. Because they're now productive members of society as opposed to stone cold killers, Sonny and Cassie decide not to report their findings. This is unusual. And
Yeah.
was there any consternation over this conclusion?
There was some. There was some, because of course that's an extraordinary decision. But again, I should say that that decision had profound ramifications for her, and the echoes of what that decision she made, that she was always tortured by, that she made the wrong decision, massively contributed to her breakdown in series 4. So it wasn't that it was taken without consequences, and I thought that was really important to show that the audience understood where she was coming from. I think lots of them thought she made the wrong decision, and that's fine. I think she thought she made the wrong decision in the end. As Sonny said, we made the decision, and now we live with it. He said that, I think, in series 3, and that, he's more sort of phlegmatic character, or pragmatic character, who can absorb those sorts of shocks more successfully than she could, because she was under more pressure from at home and at work. But I thought it was an interesting idea to play with. Again, police officers make decisions not as extreme as that, generally not to do with such a serious crime as murder, but they make moral decisions and ethical decisions like that every single day. Do we let this person go because actually they've been punished enough in different ways? What good would it be to society to lock someone like that up? That they've paid their price in the sadness and tragedy that they've lived with for 20 years since this happened. They make decisions like that all the time. Justice and the law are contextual, and a good police officer understands that to a degree. That's not to suggest that they take the law into their own hands and they, routinely flout the law book, but there is an element where judgment it comes into play. And in that story, I thought there was an argument for them articulating and then following through on what she suggested. So yeah, it had some pushback, but not a huge amount.
So you mentioned earlier that there will be a season 7. When do you convene the writer's room? Are you writing now?
I've written it all. There is no writer's room. It's me. It's me in a room. Yeah. I convene myself.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I just go away and I write it. I don't sit in a room with anyone else. I go away and say, this is what I'm going to write about. And then about 5 months later, I come back and say, here it is. I've written it.
And you have a long beard and long fingernails, and you haven't eaten.
Yeah. All of that. It's a very immersive experience, and I have a very distinctive way of working. I just go at it, and I don't really divert from it. When I'm writing Unforgotten, it's so complicated, the structure, that you just have to hold it all in your head for a period of weeks, maybe months, and just push through right through, so you can just know why everything happens, and all of the plot points and investigative points and character points, they all have to be in your head for a sustained period of time, and then bang, it's there.
No, I'm almost afraid to ask, given your level of productivity, but what's next for Chris Lang?
So I shoot Unforgotten in January. Then I shoot the second season of my new show called I, Jack, Wright, which is out on BritBox in the States. Start the second series of that in March. Then I am shooting a true story about assisted suicide debate in the UK, and I think I'm shooting that in June. I've written some of it, and I've got to write the rest of it. And then I've got a really nice development with Disney, and another one about a romantic comedy. So those two projects are in development. So yeah, that's where I am. It's going to be a very busy year for production. Most of it's written already, which is good. And then I'll just do whilst I'm in production, I'll just do some developments alongside that.
My guest on this episode of Writers at Work has been Chris Lang, the prolific and gifted writer, creator, and producer of many series, including Unforgotten, now showing on PBS Masterpiece. Chris, thanks so much for joining us on Writers at Work.
Jim, it was a complete pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Writers at Work is a production of Bliss Publications. Erin Mitchell is our producer. Music is by Joni Mitchell, performed by Keith Jarrett. For more, see writersaTworkpodcast.com. I'm your host, Jim Fusilli. Until next time, happy reading.